Look, on Leadership Now, I promised never to do commercials, but here we are. Why? Well, I have a new book in the works. It's coming out spring 2026, and I wanted to give you an advance heads up about it. The title, The Future of Work is Gray, and it's kind of a big deal to me because the book dives into the age crisis that's reshaping work as we know it. It's something that I call age debt, but spoiler alert, it does turn into some solution. There's some hope, there's some positive, and that's called the experience dividend. So if your workplace still thinks that age is a liability, well, it's time to retire that mindset. In fact, we might want to retire the word retire. So yeah, I don't do ads. This is a special occasion, and for it, I am willing to go gray. And maybe Grey Goose will sponsor me, not sure. Anyway, spring 2026, the future of work is gray. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Leadership Now with me, Dan Pontifrac. Today in the house, I'm so excited for Simon Chan. Simon, first a quick bio. We're going to get into some things about longevity, let's say. So Simon, you are founder and CEO of a great consulting firm known as Adapt with Intent that works with leaders, educators, and organizations to reframe their thinking and redesign new ways of working across life stages. Your company focuses on the intersection of longevity and work and how we might adapt careers, work systems, and what retirement might look like. Simon leverages his deep expertise in the future of work, innovation, and the dynamics of the longevity economy to support senior leader teams in developing a longevity strategy to unlock new opportunities by reimagining the customer and workplace structures required to support 100-year lives. Simon, you're a talented and innovative executive. I first heard of you many moons ago at Communitech, where you were ultimately in charge of the financial services, technology, academia, not-for-profit aspects of what'd you call it? The Vice President of Talent Academy and Future of Work. Fantastic stuff. And then, of course, you spent some time as head of strategy, product, and investments for Manulife's group retirements, benefits, retail, wealth, and insurance businesses. So a wealth of background. We seem to be of the same vintage. So first of all, when you think about Adapt with Intent, why have you started a consulting firm that is trying to help organizations rethink how and what longevity is all about? Let's start there.
Cool. Well, I mean, thanks for the intro. Seems like I've been working for a long time, I guess, Dan? Uh, yeah, I spent most of my career, as you pointed out, kind of in the financial services sector. So I spent a lot of time on the retirement side of things, working on strategy, product, and innovation. And one of the things I found very interesting about that experience was that often in financial services, we only talked about, how much do you need for retirement? And we really never talked about what it means to be in retirement and what are some of the things to think about a little bit more broadly. So that was kind of the retirement side that got me interested in the topic. The other side was, as you mentioned, I worked at Communitech in the tech sector, and I really saw how workplaces were changing in terms of how people are trying to attract talent, older and younger. And really the theme that came up was flexibility. So I kind of took those two things together. I spent some time thinking about kind of all the times I've done strategy sessions, innovation sessions with executive teams. And while I saw longevity and demographics on the list, oftentimes what I found was there was really nobody responsible for it, like somebody responsible for, say, data and AI or technology, or they saw it as very much a risk. So it was on the risk management framework, and we talked about all the risks associated with longer lives and aging demographics. And so to me, what became apparent was that there's risks associated with longevity and demographics, but there's a lot of opportunities as well for innovation around particularly our societal structures, whereby most of what we've built to support people through their lives is built for a 65, 70-year life, whether that be education, whether it be how we plan for finances, whether it be housing, et cetera, workplaces, and it's not built for a 90 to 100-year life, which is where we're projected to be, and especially as we look in the future, people are going to live longer. I thought there was a really just a unique opportunity. And so I named the firm Adapt with Intent is because we really don't know what the future is. I think it really is about management teams, leadership teams adapting to this space of longevity, but doing it with some level of intention and understanding, what are some of the implications of that broader trend of longevity and age diversity.
So, speaking of intentionality, then, Simon, one of the things I wanted to ask you about was, well, this isn't a sexy topic. I mean, we're aging. Whoop-de-doo. So, why is it that you think that organizations need to be spending more time thinking about this file? Because to me, some of the work that I've done thus far is like, we'll get to it. That's not a big deal. And to me, and to clearly to you, it seems like, no, hair's on fire. We're walking off a cliff here slowly, but no one's paying attention to this. Am I right, or where are you sitting on this one?
Well, I mean, the hair comment, of course, we could relate both to to any type of hair comment. But yeah, I get that question a lot. Is demographics, longevity, this isn't new, right? We know we've been aging. It's been an aging society, and that's true. It's a fairly slow moving trend. But what I would say is we're now approaching a bit of a tipping point, right? So in Canada in particular, we are right below what they call a super age country. So super age country is really when the population is about 1 in 5 over the age of 65, so 20%. And we're at about 19%. So we're projected to hit that over the next couple of years. And so I say that we're at bit of a tipping point in the sense that this trend has been talked about for a long time, and people have kind of kicked the can down the road. But we're about to hit a period of time where we will see a fair amount of aging happening, and not just aging. We're looking to see a lot of diversity in our population, and I think that's what we're seeing now. Is that a lot of people focus on the idea that it is an aging population. I like to focus on the fact that it's more of an age diverse population. So what do I mean by that? If you look back kind of turn of the century or even 50 years ago, we were predominantly a very young society. If you think about kind of the typical demographic pyramids, you had a lot of people who were younger, very few older people. And as I mentioned, we're not at this tipping point where we're seeing more and more people aging. The fastest growing part of the population is over 50 plus. We're seeing more and more centenarians. We're seeing more people be more productive, well into their 70s and 80s. And we're now seeing a very age diverse population. So the age diversity is now, which means we have equal number of people across age spans. And so that is happening now. What's going to happen in the next number of years is that you will continue to see this aging population kind of tip over into this super age country, the super age society. And if you want to look at other societies like Japan, Singapore, Italy, Germany, et cetera, who are, in Japan's case, they're, I think it's about 28% of their population is over the age of 60. You could already see that those countries have started to adapt their systems, adapt the way they work, how they support older workers in an age diverse population. That's going to come to North America and to Canada. So you're right, it's a slow moving kind of trend, but it's one that's coming. And again, I think because it's been framed so much as a risk and not an innovative opportunity.
Mm,
I think that's where business leaders, institutional leaders will start to recognize that there's an actual economic activity that's here. People over age of 55 account for, I think, 35% of GDP globally. So they account for a large part of the population, not only from a population perspective, from a spending perspective as well.
So, in the work that you're doing, then I'm assuming then there are misconceptions that still need to be sorted out with senior leaders and organizations. So, tell me a few of the misconceptions on this file that you come across without getting necessarily to solutions yet, just like what's getting in the way, I suppose.
Well, I mean, there's a number of things. It's just from a pure priority perspective, it doesn't hit the radar, especially for senior leaders, because they are focused on kind of those very near term, in your face priorities, like what I mean. Obviously, AI right now is the hottest topic. Digitization was a hot topic before, globalization, et cetera. So what's getting in the way is just sheer priorities, and I don't think that's specific to longevity and demographics. It's just specific to the fact that we live in a world that's very complicated, fast changing, fast moving. I think when you open up the aperture and help them understand a little bit about what are the potential implications to individuals, to their workplaces, to government, and then talk about, again, those opportunities.
Hmm.
It's actually fairly quick for them to get there. It's just not something they've thought about through the lens of opportunity. It's one that they've thought about through the lens of risk. I think the other thing too is we have some very dated social narratives around what it means to age. Oftentimes when I'm working with management teams, I show a slide and it's got two pictures, right? It's got the picture of the Golden Girls from the 1980s, and it's got a picture of the kind of 2010 movie Sex and the City, their second edition. And when I highlight to them that the people in both pictures are identically the same age, in that late 40s, early 50s vintage, they're shocked by the fact that how much, even in the last 20 years, our image of aging has changed. So we're really operating a lot around kind of, I would call it dated social norms, social narratives, as well as dated structures. And so it's really a logic exercise to help one create space for senior leaders to spend the time to understand the trend a little bit more deeply, to shift their perspective from risk to opportunity. Oftentimes, what I do is, I'll say to senior leaders, let's spend some time putting ourselves in the shoes of our customers, in particular if they're in the retirement space. It's easy for them to do, think about what it means to transition to retirement, et cetera. But when you get them to think through that lens, what happens is most senior executives are of the vintage, they're 50 plus.
Mm.
And when they realize and they spend the time uh, kind of unpacking this particular topic, they actually come to a very quick conclusion that, wait a second, we don't have the structures in place. There are opportunities to innovate. People aren't marketing to me in the way that I want to live my life, in the way I want to spend my time. I don't maybe want to retire in the same way. And so very quickly they get to the conclusion that there is an opportunity. So, but it is comes down to creating space, showing them the data around the market opportunity, and then getting them to really shift to see where are the innovations around the customer innovations, but also their workforce. I think that's the other piece they quickly come to the conclusion of is they realize, their workforce is 20 to 30% of them are over the age of 50. And what are we going to do with all these people who are leaving the workforce?
I loved the comment you made just a couple minutes ago there, age diversity as opposed to aging. I really love that. But it also kind of brings up a point that as much as we are aging and healthier, living longer, of course, the flip side to that is we're not having babies as often. So our birth rates are plummeting. And if we look to Japan's birth rate of 1.0 and South Korea's of 0.76 and so on and so forth, and some of the other Asian countries and in Western Europe. It dawned on me that in North America, although US is about 1.6, Canada seems to be around 1.3-ish rate these days.
Yep.
There's a tsunami that's going to happen as well when we maybe not have enough young people. So the fact that we're living longer, great, but your age diversity point is well taken by me because we're going to have to reorganize organizations to be thinking five, maybe even six generations in the workforce. So how do we, what's the rationale for this particular question there, Simon?
Well, I think that confluence of living longer and the decline birth rates is what's creating that age diversity. And I do think that requires us to rethink, is our society built properly for an age diverse society? And so I think, and then where are the market opportunities? So some of the work that I do is in higher education, right? So higher
Mm.
education, particularly in the US, they call it the enrollment cliff, but there is a decline in traditional age students that are coming, as you pointed out, due to birth rates. And so right now, it's one of the industries that really almost predominantly serves 18 to 25-year-olds. Right. And so you're seeing progressive higher ed institutions starting to think about the fact that, well, wait a second, we are entering a period of time where we're age diverse. The fastest growing market are people 55 plus. Why are we not offering um, programming to help those people with their learning needs? And
Mm.
learning needs in your 50s is quite different than your learning needs in when you're 18 to 25. But one of the things that the role that universities play is this idea of structures to help through transition. So my son is 19, turning 20, second year university. Universities are a clear structure that is put in place for that era of life. If you're 18 to 20, what do you do? Well, you might go to university, you might go to college. There's career counselors, there's academic advisors. When you talk to your friends, it's very normal to say, my son is going to college and university. But for someone who's 55 or 60, who may be thinking about the fact that they don't, they're done with their primary career and doesn't really want to retire in the same way as, our parents did. And the data will show that half of over 55% of people now say that they think about this period of time as a new chapter in life versus their parents saw it as more rest and relaxation. Why aren't there structures in place
Hmm.
to help people 55 and 60? And is there an economic opportunity? Well, again, these progressive universities, Stanford, Harvard, University of Chicago, to name a few, have started to offer programs like called midlife transition programs. And the point is to target people at midlife to bring them back onto campus. Some of it's to take classes and explore and learn topics that you would have loved to take when you were 18. But what they also do is provide you with an opportunity to make that discovery or transition with a cohort of other people who are at the same stage as you, thinking about what to do next. And so, back to your comment about kind of declining birth rates, I think sectors and industries need to think about now that we're in an era of age diversity, how do we leverage and how do we change how we offer programs to people or products to people to leverage that age diversity. The other piece that higher ed is starting to recognize is that you talked about the fact that we have five generations in the workforce. Well, where do younger people and older people come together to practice um, working across generations before they get to the workforce? Well, with the decline of a lot of kind of third places like, church, religious organizations, community groups, higher ed is kind of the one place now where you can
Yeah.
actually bring older and younger together to get them to work together. And we did that, 30 years ago in higher ed when we became much more global. We brought international students in to create the idea of cross-cultural learning. Why are we not doing the same when it comes to age diversity?
So do you think then, taking on the example and exemplar of higher ed, excuse me, that organizations ought to be thinking about their talent that they have that are in the 50 plus crowd and maybe actually offering up that sort of mid-career or mid-life nuance kind of differentiation where there is, as you know, the difference between fluid intelligence and crystallized intelligence. There's a lot of crystallized intelligence with the 50 plus crowd who have learned behaviors, learned experiences, learned history of that organization, and perhaps they're not needing to be in that quote role that they have been in for 10 years, 5 years, whatever. But there's a way in which to maybe tap into that wisdom, sort of infuse a little bit of a different type of career that they might be taking on, whether it's part-time or full-time after that kind of 50, 55, 60 era. Is that something, is that the opportunity that maybe organizations should be thinking about?
Yeah, I think so. I think it goes back to what your question about why is it not happening now. I
Yeah.
think two things that need to shift. One is again that social narrative around what does it mean when I get to 55 or 60 is this right again today the social narrative I would still argue is the path is to retire. So one is the social narrative and the other one is I think you need to create pathways to make it frictionless and make it easy for people to continue to stay engaged. So to your workforce example, I do a number of, do a number of workshops with people who are contemplating retiring, et cetera. And whenever I mention the word work in those workshops, it's almost like I said a four-letter word. Most people are like, work. No, no. The whole point of getting to retirement is so I don't work. I don't want to work anymore. I don't want to hear about work, et cetera. But when you actually get them to unpack a little bit about what are things that work provides outside of just income, what they start to realize is, well, actually, work provides a sense of identity. I have an identity when I am at work. Work
Yeah.
provides social connections. And there's lots of people that I like that I work with. Oftentimes, what they're talking about when it comes to work is they don't like the overhead. They be done with kind of the corporate politics. They don't want to go to all the meetings. It's not that they don't like the work in and of itself. They don't like the current construct of work. So I think we need to shift the social narrative to help people understand you can work in a way where it's not a job, right? It's not onerous. It might be taking aspects of your work that you quite enjoy, whether it be going back to being a subject matter expert or maybe being a mentor for people. We need to be able to design ways for people to engage in the aspects of work that they like. But in addition to that, we need to make sure that those things are designed at the organizational level so that
Mhm.
they can actually pair those things so it's a win-win. So I think it really comes down to how do organizations create different roles, different structures to continue to get people who have a lot of institutional knowledge or crystallized intelligence to help them stay engaged, but engaged on their own terms so that it's a win-win, so that they still have a sense of connection, identity, et cetera. Help them understand that that's actually important. And for the organization, are there other ways, lower cost ways or more flexible ways for them to engage this population that isn't the traditional full time? And then I think it really comes down to pathways because what I'm talking about exists. I've talked to many people who have, retired from their current role. They come back as a contractor, 10, 12 hours a week. And they actually provide a lot of value. And if you talk to their leaders, they say they provide a lot of value because they have institutional knowledge, et cetera. The challenge is that's not a formalized program. That's
Right.
me negotiating with Dan, my boss, for an arrangement to make that happen. It's not socially accepted. It's not easy from an HR policy perspective. It's not an easy pathway. And so I think what we need to think about are where are there programs that workplaces can design that actually open up that conversation prior to when people are ready to retire, to actually start that process, help them think about, well, what are you going to do in your next chapter? Do you want to work in some way, shape, or form? How could we partner to design something that's a win for you and a win for us? And I think that's where the opportunity lies.
So tangentially, I also want to get your thoughts because of your background and that big brain of yours on the technology file and its integration here with sort of an age diverse organization. So, are there examples you've seen, whether it's in Asia or elsewhere, where technology, automation, artificial intelligence, wearables, whatever it may be, is actually helping the cause to either deconstruct or disintegrate ageism and or just helping the individual in that post 50 era still work but with some sort of, I guess, connection to the technology? What's happening out there?
Yeah, so I'd say that the examples are, particularly in North America, are fairly limited. In Asia, I think some of the examples you'll see in on the labor side of things, because again, there's knowledge work and then more physical labor
Hmm.
work. That in Japan, a number of the factories and a number of the kind of industrial sector, what they've done is, believe it or not, they've actually leveraged technology in terms of things like exoskeletons and suits that people can actually put on who are a little bit older, and it allows them to move something from A to B without the same strain on their body, right? And I think you're going to see more of those types of uses of technology where, whether it be exosuits or whether it be different types of aids to help people stay engaged, continue to do the work that they want to do, that they enjoy, but it's not as onerous on their bodies. I think from a knowledge perspective, I think if you can't go to a conference or you can't go to a podcast anymore without hearing the term AI put out there. AI is everywhere, right? That's the topic of du jour. And oftentimes when people talk about AI, one of the challenges that I always hear is like, well, what are we going to do about AI? How do we control AI? How do we make sure that AI is working for us versus the other way around? And so when you think about, and then also obviously talking about, the threat of elimination of jobs and things of that nature associated with AI. Well, when I think about, well, what are the things that AI will have trouble doing or more trouble doing? They're typically the human skills, things like connecting the dots, emotional intelligence, leadership skills, a lot of those kind of crystallized intelligence aspects, things that you talked about. And so I think we need to be able to balance off our use of technology and complement it, because it's not going to be either or, complement it with effectively wisdom, right? And so how do we actually ensure that we're utilizing technology, but making sure that we retain the wisdom we need so that the wisdom can help influence, the direction of AI. And I think if you look at where, again, generally wisdom resides, it's in older workers in knowledge work, right? And we just talked about the fact that the probably, 20 to 30% of them are going to go in the next 10 years, going to retire. So again, back to how do we retain that wisdom and knowledge in a way to help the organization, help us direct how we use AI. And the other thing I think is, back to the intergenerational engagement part is, as younger workers come into the workforce, many of the tasks that they would have done are being automated by
Hmm.
offshoring, AI, et cetera. And they don't get the chance to develop some of the skills that they would have back in the day when they would be more learning from people at meetings. They're learning from people from observing how they do things. I think from a coaching and mentoring perspective, we really need to actually get younger, talent to be working with older talent to help them continue to foster and build those human skills that we talked about, because those are the skills that we're going to need our younger generation to have in spades, as the older generation continues to retire, so that they again can work with the new technology that's coming. So we really need to develop these kind of non-technical skills, and I don't think these can be developed by traditional teaching methods of a professor or a teacher at the front of a class. This is really done by doing, observing, and working with people who have experience, that you can really learn from. And I think there's a benefit to the people who are continuing to stay engaged. Some of the brightest, most adaptable people I know are people who are 50 plus, and they're craving to learn how to use new technology. So that idea that you can't teach quote an old dog new tricks, I think that is a really dated concept. And I think there's a really beautiful opportunity for learning on both sides for both older and younger adults.
Well, it reminds me, Simon, that we can learn from a couple different examples. First of all, First Nations Indigenous and their elderly circles. I mean, for lack of a better term, basically that's wisdom being transferred around the circle of song, of prayer, of story. And in Japanese circles, they've had quality circles forever, where the sort of older workers are sharing examples in these quality circles of what it was like or how I've learned what I've learned through this era at the organization, et cetera. So that's probably a really good two examples to complement what you've alluded to. I actually wanted to come back, and I didn't want to lose it because it was such a profound point. Um, so you had alluded to the fact that higher ed can become places of gathering. And I'm struck by all the research, whether it's the Harvard Gluick study with Waldinger, and how over the 80-year period we want a flourishing life is by connection and by networks and by people and relationships. By Putnam's Bowling Alone seminal book, where as the decrease in the number of places like church and faith groups and community centers, et cetera, plummets, that again we're sort of losing out on the opportunity to connect and to feel, to your point, a sense of self and id and purpose and meaning. So, do you think, again, there's an opportunity for organizations then in this post-pandemic era where, to your point again, I'm connecting all the dots here, that younger people are not learning through osmosis and through instructional kind of observational behavior inside a meeting or inside work examples, whatever, right? Do you think that it's incumbent upon the organization to actually have very specific opportunities for the young, the middle, the old to be face to face in organizations? And so, how does the organization then to rethink all of this preamble, in your view, to make sure that it's healthier, smarter, performing, productive, innovative, all those other great verbs?
Yeah, so I think the two points I would make is one is I think we need to be a lot more intentional about how we bring groups together, in terms of designing it so that they actually are not just randomly colliding, which is fine, right? You can have the random collisions,
Yeah.
but we actually create the conditions for different generations to learn from each other, appreciate each other's perspectives, and work together. So I think, back in the day where, almost predominantly everything was in person, you can kind of, rely on inertia for people to, bump into each other, learn from each other, but it was fairly organic, which I think can still happen. But I think as we live in a more distributed society, where there aren't natural places other than the workplace for people to come together, I actually think workplaces or organizations need to create structured programs to help bring groups together, right? And I mean, these are very basic team building, team formation type concepts, but I think organizations need to lean into that,
Mm.
particularly as you're looking at problem solving. There's lots of studies out there that show that diversity of thought leads to greater innovation. I think if you're going to bring a project team together, right? Typically, you just kind of throw a project team together. Maybe you design it by looking at the skills that you need, et cetera. I think again, back to intentionality. I think you have to intentionally be more thoughtful about Are you bringing an age diverse group together and say a problem solving for, say, building a new product? And then how are you creating the conditions for them to appreciate each other and get to know each other? Because that's not something they typically do outside of the workplace. Back to your point about Dr. Robert Putnam's work around the decline of third places like the bowling
Mhm.
alley, like church groups, like clubs, that doesn't naturally happen anymore. And so we need to learn to exercise those muscles. Well, the only other point I would add to you is that I think in listening to this, I think leaders will say, well, we have to make sure that everybody's back in person, right? We have to get back into the workplace. We can't be doing remote anymore. And I would maybe just say, yes, there's an important part of in person, but I think you can still form relationships and build bonds virtually. Again, I think you need to be intentional about it, right? And think if you're going to bring a group together, it's not about just bringing a bunch of windows together. Is how do you create intentionality in the formation of this virtual group to help them work together and again appreciate each other's strengths and what they bring to the table. Maybe it starts in person and it goes to online. I think again we can't lose that flexibility piece because back to the original conversation about how do we continue to engage older adults in working in a way that makes sense for them. A big part of that's going to be flexibility. If you tell a 62-year-old who's thinking about retiring, that part of the deal is for them to be in the workplace in person 5 days a week. They're not likely to do that. And so one of the beautiful things about COVID and about this opportunity for remote is that we can bring people in who might be want more flexibility. It's still incumbent that we build those relationships, build the opportunity for them to get to know each other, work together as a team. But I still think we need to hold the ability to have flexibility because that's how you're going to get the talents. Because if you have someone that's a subject matter expert that's been in your organizations for 30 years, if they're going to stay on as a subject matter expert or a coach 10 to 12 hours a week, yes, they can be in person from time to time and as new players come in, but there's no reason they can't be in Florida,
Right.
zooming in, meeting and providing that subject matter expertise in a project huddle or a stand up in the morning. So again, we just make sure that we think about this as a design challenge where we design the solutions that fit the organization, that fit what the younger talent wants, but also fit what the older talent want. Because I think if it's 5 days in person, I don't think you're going to get a lot of people to agree to that.
Okay, you've been gracious with your time. Last one for you. The
Sure.
metaphor career sprints versus career marathons. Tell me a bit about that and what organizations need to be helping the employee think through this new longevity aspect to their lives.
Yeah, so I think that's the great analogy around thinking about sprinting versus a bit of a longer game. So the way I think about it is most people today don't have the benefit of a guaranteed pension or retirement plan. So the reality is the math of trying to save for 30 years for a 30-year retirement just is a very tough prospect. Obviously, there's challenges from a affordability perspective around homes and inflation, et cetera. So the idea of saving for 30 years to fund a 30-year retirement is going to be challenging for most. So that's one. The second is if you're going to live, um, until you're 90 to 100. So in other words, over the last century, we've been gifted an extra 30 years of longevity. If you ask most people at the beginning of their life, if I gave you an extra 30 years, where would you put it? Most people will not say, well, I'm just going to kind of run my sprint and then just at the end have 30 years of just rest and leisure. That's not really what most people would do. What they would probably do is take it and break it up and put it in their years and elongate that. And so, what I think is likely going to happen is that the reality is most people are going to probably work a 50 or 60-year career. So, my son who's 19, 20, it's reasonable for him to think about the fact that he's going to work a 50 or 60 years. They don't see retirement the same way we did anyways. Now that sounds terrible, right? If I say 50 to 60-year career, most people again shudder at that. And so I think the trade-off is going to be if organizations are going to engage people for a 50, 60-year period, they can't the people can't do it at the pace that we demand today, right? If people had to sprint for 60 years based on today's pace, I don't think it's sustainable. So I think the trade-off is going to be flexibility. I think over time, what we're going to see are workplaces, societal norms, people saying, sure, I'm going to work 50 to 60 years because I need to from a practical standpoint. But what I'm going to do is have more flexibility, which will mean I might be able to flex from full-time to part-time. I might be able to go from periods to where it's 5 days a week to 3 days a week because I need to be around to support my children or to do more caregiving. I might decide to go and take a gap year in my 30s to go back and reskill in some way. I may take a gap year in my 50s to go to one of these midlife transition programs. I might go from full-time to entrepreneurship. So, I think I mentioned to you last time we spoke, I'm an ambassador for the Stanford Center on Longevity, who does a lot of research on the implications of a 100-year life. And one of the taglines they have, which I love, is transitions are a feature, not a bug. And I think that's what needs to happen is that we need to get better at helping people with transitions, building on ramps and off ramps that are smoother in an organizational workplace perspective to sustain that marathon that's likely going to be a 60-year career versus this kind of 30 to 35-year sprint where people are just kind of sprinting as fast as they can to get to retirement because that's the end of the game and they've won when they get to retirement, only to realize they probably have another 20 to 25 years of rest and relaxation, which may or may not be that appealing to people who want to continue to stay useful and engaged.
Well, may we all have a transition that's a feature and not a bug, Simon. This has been fantastic. Thanks so much. Simon Chan, you're the founder of Adapt with Intent. Where can we find out more about you and the organization?
Yeah, you can reach out to me on LinkedIn, or you can visit our website at www.adaptwithintent.com. And I'd love to hear from people around what their experiences are in terms of thinking about whether longevity is even on their mind. And for leaders, I'd love to hear from them in terms of, have they thought about this as more of an opportunity and versus a risk, and where are some of the new innovations that are coming from to meet the new needs of a 100-year life.
Amazing. Well, may you and I live to 100 and hang out at some point and clink a glass for the fact that we made it. And first of all, thank you again for this pretty brilliant mind of yours. And Adapt with Intent is certainly doing great things. And I hope to learn and observe in the vapor trails of your goodness. So, Simon Chan, thank you again.
Thanks a lot for the time, Dan. It's great speaking with you.
All right, folks, that was another episode of Leadership Now with me, Dan Pontefract, in the house, founder, CEO of Adapt with Intent, Simon Chan. We'll see you next time.